Okay, the Vilna Gaon and the Tzemach Tzedek wrestle over the Yarmulka. Sunday Kollel. Nice to see everybody. A feature of today's Jewish life is very much the yarmulke. You know, you see someone wearing a yarmulke, it's an indication the person's a religious Jew. Without the yarmulke, you don't know. You don't know. It's become such a strong symbol of Judaism today. And the truth is, it wasn't always like that, as we're going to see. The majority of opinions seem to believe that in essence yarmulke is discretionary. It's just
I learned about the Italian guy.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We're gonna bolster him up again today. However, there are some, namely the Alter Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek, who believe that the yarmulke is not just a nice deed, but it could be lawfully required for a number of reasons. But the fact is, in an Orthodox practice, definitely in the Chassidic practice, already from the Upshedden, sometimes even from earlier, we have that kid wearing the yarmulke, and it is based on a Gemara in Shabbos, perhaps, and we'll see in a moment. And of course, we have the story that all the kids hear about the Shapiro brothers, the two grandchildren of Reb Pinchas Koritzer, Reb Shmuel Abba Shapiro, and the Pinchas Shapiro, who had the Slavita printing press. And they were great individuals. Unfortunately, in the 1830s, there was a libel against them, an accusation. Somebody was found hanging dead in their
shop.
Yeah, in their factory, and in the printing house. And they were accused with the murder. And although there was the evidence, there was no evidence. The person apparently took his own life, but nonetheless, the Russians, the Tsar, they were more than happy to hold them accountable, and they were sentenced to many, many years exile in Siberia. But before they went to Siberia, they had to walk in between a group of soldiers, 500 soldiers, bare-chested, and the soldiers had whips and sticks and canes, which apparently were coated with some type of teeth. And they just beat them up. And if they would come out alive, then they went to Siberia.
Wonderful.
And as they were going through, Shmuel Abba's yarmulke fell off. And they were beating him, he wouldn't move. He would not move down the line, even though it caused him to be inflicted with many more hits with those sticks and canes and who knows what. But he wouldn't move till he got his yarmulke. So yarmulke is serious business. They say yarmulke comes from Yorei Malka, fearing God. And let's see what it's all about. So we have quite a number of sources. So let's move. Number one, it's a Gemara in Kedushin. It's kind of really where it all begins. And we're going to see a lot of background in the Gemara and the Poskim, and then we'll get to the big debate between the Vilna Gaon and the Tzemach Tzedek. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, number one, it's the Gemara in Kedushin. Kol ha'over aveira b'seiser. Anyone that transgresses an aveira secretly, meaning you feel that, well, I'm in an enclosed area, no one can see me. God, as if he sees me. Well, it's as if you're denying the presence of God. Ki'ilu doichek ragle shchin. It's like you're pushing away God's feet. Because it says in Yeshaya, Kama Hashem, so said Hashem, Hashemayim kisi, the heavens is my chair, and the earth, Hadom ragle, is my footstool. So to speak, God's feet are down here. So if you commit a sin in privacy, thinking that nobody sees, God doesn't see, but God's feet are here, so you're kind of casting God's feet away. Then, Amar Rabbi Shuban Levi, Asur la'adam she'ahalach arba amas b'koymas kufa. You can't walk 4 amas with an erect posture. You know, your mother always tells you walk straight. Well, not so fast. Asur la'adam she'ahalach arba amas b'koymas kufa. You can't walk, it's asur, 4 amas, b'koymas kufa, with an erect posture. Shenemar maloi chol haaretz kavod, the Eibish's glory is everywhere. The way Rashi explains is, imagine God's in heaven and his honor descends from heaven down here. So the Eibish's kavod is descending all the way down to the earth. And if you stand in erect posture, it's like you're trying to push it away. Like, don't come to, this is my domain. Stay up there. Don't come all the way down here. This is my domain. So it's Asr. Now, the truth is, not every time the Gemara says the word Asr does it literally mean Asr. Sometimes we have quite a few examples. The word Asr just means it's inappropriate. Especially when here it's not really a legal halacha, it's just the way you walk in the street. So there are some that believe Asr here is a loose term, but we're going to learn today that it's literal. But here's the clincher, the third statement of the Gemara. Rav Huna berei de Rav Yeshua. There was an Amayr, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua. Loi maski, he would not walk, arba amas, 4 amas, begilui harosh, with an uncovered head. He would not walk 4 amas bareheaded. Amar, he said, Shechina l'mayla maroshi, the Shechina is above my head. So it's almost a certain haughtiness to walk with an bare head. There's something above you, and I guess to remind you of the fact there's something above you, you literally wear something on top of your head. Now here it doesn't say Asr. Notice, by the erect posture, it's Asr, it's Asr to walk. Here the Gemara is just commenting on the practice of Rav Huna, the son of Rav Yeshua. It doesn't say what everyone should do. It doesn't say the word Asr, it's just telling what Rav Huna did. Okay, so that's one Gemara. So we're going to start off seeing 5 different Gemaras just to get a bit of a piece. These are all pieces of the puzzle, okay? And you're going to see that although everyone's dealing with the same pieces, but the way you put them together can give you a completely different picture. The Vilna Gaon's conclusion, the Tzemach Tzedek's conclusion are east and west, although they're all dealing with the same pieces of the puzzle. Okay?
And Ramban, that's the puzzle with those proven.
Yeah, so many things. Number 2 is a Gemara in Pesachim, okay? Now this sounds like an outlandish story, but we're going to learn a halacha from it, okay? Hahu bar kasha de Masa. There was some watchman of the town. Sorry, the Aramaic, but this was the lingo the Jews would. This was the Jewish vernacular years back. Da azil v'koi, he was walking gabe zradato or zardato, some type of tree. Da have a samich lamasa near the town, and it was full of demons. That's the discussion of the Gemara there. Shedim, Pesachim, towards the end of Pesachim. Alu Bey Shitin Shidi, 60 demons entered him, V'istakin, and he was, oh my God, paranoid. V'istakin means he was in danger. Maybe he was parala, who knows. Asa lahum rabbanon, so a certain rabbi came, the law yada, he didn't know the zeradata, the Shitin Shadi, he didn't know that this type of tree carries 60 demons. But the rabbi knew how to write a kameya, an amulet, but he only thought it was one demon. So, Kosav la Kameh, the rabbi wrote an amulet, L'chada Sheda, for one demon. Then Shama, the rabbi, starts to hear that the demons in the tree are laughing at him. The Tolu Chinga Begaveh, they were dancing in the tree, the demons, and they were laughing. The Kamashu Hachi, and they sang like this. They said, Sudra Damar, the head covering. Sudr, like a handkerchief, is a head covering. It refers to a head covering. Now, we'll talk about it, but let's just translate now. The sudr, the head covering that you wear, kitzurba marabonon, is like that of a scholar. But badikna beibamar, but we're searching you out, and we realize the law yada baruch, you don't even know how to make a bracha. You're wearing the clothes of a rabbi, but you don't speak you don't have the scholarship of a rabbi. The bracha they're referring to is baruch oiter yisrael b'sifar, you say every morning. We'll see about this soon, which you make once you put on a head covering. That's what the bracha refers to. God crowns us with glory. And they were laughing that you don't even know how to make that bracha, or you didn't know that bracha is connected to you. In other words, you're not a scholar, but you're wearing the scholar. They were laughing at him because you thought there was one demon over here. There's 60 of us. You don't have a clue what's going on, do you? So, another rabbi came. The Yada who knew, a second rabbi comes who knew that this tree has 60 evil forces in it. So Kasav Lar Kima, he wrote a new kameya. He wrote an amulet with against 60 demons. Shaman, the second rabbi, heard that the demons were talking in panic. The Ka'amru, they said to each other, Panu manaycha, get your stuff out, take your suitcases out of here. Each of them are telling the others, get out of this tree, we're going to get hurt. That's the story. But the fact is, the Gemara says, where there's a halacha to be learned. There's something called a sudr, a type of head covering, which the rabbis wore. Now, does this refer to any type of head covering, and it's only the rabbis that wore it, or it's talking about a specific head covering that the rabbis wore, whereas the average people wore something else. That's the big question. Sudr can mean something very loose. So the option A is that the fact that you're wearing any head covering at all means you're a rabbi. The ordinary Jews, in contrast, wore nothing. Or no, maybe everyone wore something, but here we're talking about a sudr, it's a specific type of covering, and that was unique to the rabbis, because that's the big shaila, obviously. Join me number 3. We have a Gemara in Kedushin that lends itself to a similar question. The Gemara number 3 in Kedushin is talking about pidyon haben, about taking the kohen, right? The kohen takes your money for you to redeem your firstborn, even though the kohenim today are assumption, let's say presumed kohenim, like Rabbi Yaakov Emden writes in his Teshuva, the chutzpah for you, based on your presumption, you're going to keep the money, you give the money back, what you're holding on to the money for. Anyhow, but in number 3, the Gemara says that although you're supposed to give 5 silver coins, if you have a different item that the kohen finds valuable for himself, he can say to me that's worth 5 silver coins. If we're in a desert and I just have a bottle of water, you could say that bottle of water is worth 5 silver coins.
15.
Yeah, or even more. I want change, right? Ki hader Rav Kana shokil sudra. Rav Kana, who was a kohen, Taisus actually suggests Rav Kana may not have been a kohen, but his wife was a bas kohen, and you can give the pidyon haben to the daughter of a kohen, and not just her, but her husband, who's a Yisrael, could take it on her behalf. Taisus suggests that, yeah.
Elevate you people every day.
Anyhow, says the Gemara, Rav Kana shokil sudra, he took a sudra, a handkerchief, or some material, Mibei pidyon haben, from a pidyon haben, Amar lei, and he told the father of the son, L'didi, said Rav Kana, to me, chazi li chomesh, to me this is worth 5 silver coins. And even though it's just a sudr. So Amar Ravashi said, now Ravashi is later, he's commenting on the story, Lo Yamar, and this is not said, Ella only could go in Rav Kana. That only works for Rav Kana. The Gavra Rabba, Rav Kana was a great man. Umiboyle sudra aresha, he needs to have a sudra on his head. So for a rabbi in the street, not right to be uncovered, he needs to get something fast. To him, it's definitely worth more than 5 silver coins to get. It's like a bottle of water in the middle of the desert. He needs it fast. It's urgent. It's an emergency. Aval kula, but anybody else who's not a big rabbi and they're a kohen can't say that handkerchief is worth 5 silver coins. Rubbish. It's not. So the Gemara clearly says only a Gavra Rabba wears a sudr on his head. Rashi on the Gemara says, Taka, because he was a great man, he could not go begilui roish, uncovered. It sounds like the sudr over here was to get you from bareheaded to covered. And yet the Gemara says not only is it only a pious act, it's only for the Gavra Rabba, for the greatest rabbis. The greatest rabbis cover their heads. But you could ask, well, maybe no. Maybe everyone has some sort of covering. The sudr is something unique, something special. And that only a Gavra Rabba wears. The only issue is Rashi's terminology, because Rashi says since he was a great man, he couldn't afford to have Gilui Harosh, bareheadedness. You'll have to, maybe you could say that bareheadedness itself is all relative. In other words, if a rabbi is supposed to have a hat and he only has his yarmulka, he's considered bareheaded to some degree. Maybe you could kvetshine into Rashi that Gilui Roish of Rav Kana, he definitely had everyone has a head covering. But relative to the covering he needs to have per his position, per the up hat, those hats they had in Europe. Yeah. So therefore, he's considered bareheaded. But Rashi does use the word bare. That's already called interpreting Rashi. That's not the simple translation of Rashi's word. Now, without Rashi, we could have said that in the Gemara. As far as the Gemara reads well, it could be everybody has a covering. The sudr is something unique, and Rav Kana needed that urgently. It's Rashi who says he needed the sudr because he was bareheaded, Gilui Roish, which seems to indicate that other people are completely bareheaded. That's what it would seem from Rashi. Look at number 4, we have another Gemara. Another Gemara in Kiddushin. Mishtabach Leid Rav Chisda le Rav Huna b'Rav Hamnuna. Rav Chisda was speaking to his friend Rav Huna, and he was praising Rav Hamnuna. The Adam Gadol is a great man. So Amalei Rav Huna told his friend Rav Chisda, Takeh, when he comes to your hand, next time Rav Hamnuna visits you, Rav Huna tells Rav Chisda, send him my direction. Kiyasa, he came. Chazi, Rav Huna saw the loy paris sudra, that Rav Hamnuna did not have the sudra. Which again, the question is, does that mean he had nothing at all, or just not this sudra? Right? The sudra, again, the same question that we've had is, does the sudra mean a covering versus complete bareheadedness, or sudra means a choshev type of head covering? And if you don't have it, it means you just have a basic head covering. The same question over here. But Omar Lei, the fact is Rav Huna was unimpressed, he was dismayed. And he asked Rav Hamnuna, my time aloi prisa sudra, why don't you have that sudra on your head? Omar Lei said, Deloi nasivna, I'm not married. There was a special type of covering you wore when you're married. Type of hat, type of... So Adrinu la'apei minei, Rav Huna turned away from him, he wouldn't look at him. Not because he didn't have the head covering, but because he wasn't married. Amalei, he said, Chazi, see to it. Deloy chazis l'hu la'apa, you won't see my face again ad the nosas till you get married. Rav Hamnuna was an older bacher, a bachelor, who was busy learning and not getting married. Rav Huna was quite severe in his outlook. He said, you better get married young. You better get married young. He says, pushing off marriage, yeah, you're busy learning, but yeah, where's your head? You got to get married and then you can learn in purity. That was his position, and therefore he wouldn't even look at Rav Hamnuna, not because he was bareheaded, but because he was busy learning and not getting married.
His wife was the shafkin.
Every Jew is a shadchan by, that's their second, the fallback trade. The fallback trade. Now, so over here as well, we have a question, what does sudr mean? Does sudr mean that if you're not wearing it, you're mamash bareheaded? So then what's Rav Hamnuna saying? You only cover your head, you only wear a yarmulka when you get married? Till then you're completely bareheaded? And you get married. We know that, let's say in Lubavitch, we start wearing a gartel after marriage, or a talus, like many from Yidden have that minhag. And all of a sudden you have the yarmulke, you ever heard that? The yarmulke starts when you get married. Or maybe not. Sudr here doesn't mean a yarmulke, it means a more official head covering. And that is maybe type of hat, and that began when you get married. Again, it's ambiguous in the Gemara. Number 5, one more Gemara for now. It's a Gemara in Shabbos, famous story, the end of the Gemara Shabbos. The Imei de Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, the mother of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Omri la Kaldoi, the astronomers told her. But we have more papers here. There's a set of papers right there. For you. They told her, Berich Ganvahu, your son's going to be a thief. They told Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's mother, dein Sohn wird sein Ganev, is going to be a thief. Loi shavakte, like the Gemara says, Roiv Gan v'Yisrael. Most thieves are Jews. It's a very old Jewish custom. Loi shavikte, she didn't allow him gluye reishe to walk around bareheaded. Amrole, the mother told him, Ksi reishach, cover your head, my child. Ki heichi de teva Allah, you should have upon yourself a mosa d'shmaya, fear of heaven. So she wanted him to wear a yarmulke. Maybe that way his destiny will lead him away from being a thief. Uboy rachmi, and daven, beseech mercy. Now, loy havayod, Rav Nachman didn't understand why. Why was he different? Loy havayod amai ka'amrle, he didn't know why his mother was telling him this. Yom echad, one day, Yosef, he was sitting, Kagaris, he was learning Tute Dikla underneath a date palm. Nafal glima me'ilave reishe. The glima, now glima usually means a cloak. So that's very important. This wasn't stam a little yarmulke. This was some serious head armor that he was wearing. It fell off his head. And the moment it fell off his head, Dali Eine, exactly. He lifted up his eyes. Chazel l'dikla, he took his eyes out of his sefer, or maybe he was learning off by heart, but he raises his eyes and he sees the date palm. Al me yitzre, his yetzer took hold of him. Solik, he ascended the date palm. Poske, he grabbed the kibura, a cluster of date b'shine with his teeth. And while he was holding on, and then he realized what this yarmulke was all about. So the yarmulke was able to change his destiny. So, if you understand this is referring to just a basic yarmulke head covering, then what's the Gemara telling you? That other kids didn't have a yarmulke. It was specifically him. It was specifically him, and he wasn't even sure why he was the one that had to wear a yarmulke. It sounds like it wasn't standard practice. Right. So, a simple reading of these 5 Gemaras would tell you wearing a yarmulke is not mandatory. The Gemara number 1 said it's also to walk in an erect posture. It doesn't say it's also to walk with bareheaded. It just says Rav Huna wouldn't walk 4 amos. It's not telling you what to do. Number 2 said clearly that the Sudar was specifically for rabbis. As the Gemara number 3 with Rav Kana, that only a Gavra Rabbah has a Sudar. Number 4 as well, Rav Amnuna says till you marry you don't wear a Sudar. If Sudar is a type of yarmulke, then all these Gemaras are clearly telling you that yarmulke is not, you don't have to cover your head. The average person can walk, definitely if you're not married, you can walk out on the street without a covering. And number 5 as well, at least about the children, it sounds like children didn't wear. So if you jump to number 10 at the bottom of the page, sorry, we'll go see number 10 and number 12.
Number 4 is 2 different Rav Hunas?
Number 1 and number 4 is just Rav Hamnuna. Oh, the Huna, yeah, different Rav Huna. There's Rav Huna, Berei, the Rav Yeshua, and regular Rav Huna. Regular Rav Huna is a friend of Rav Chisda. He was older. Younger, the next generation is Rav Huna, Berei, the Rav Yeshua, is a friend of Rav Papa. Yeah. But look at number 10, it's another Gemara in Shabbos. Amar Rav Huna Berei Rav Yeshua. Here's the same guy as number 1. Look at number 10. Teisili means succumb to me, I deserve reward. The loy sagina dalad amas, I don't walk 4 amas begili arosh bareheaded. It's the same guy as in number 1. Now what is this telling you? That I deserve reward because I did something remarkable. I don't go 4 amas without a head covering. It sounds like, according to strict law, you're allowed to walk without a head covering. It can't be any clearer, seemingly. But then Amar Rav Sheshes said Rav Sheshes, Teisili, I deserve reward. The Kiyamti, I fulfilled the mitzvah of tefillin. Really, one guy. And Amar Rav Nachman, Teisili, I deserve reward because I fulfilled the mitzvah of tzitzis. So Rashi said what they both mean is they never walked 4 amos without tefillin or tzitzis. Right. Everyone wears tefillin here, tzitzis at some point, right? But Rav Sheshes never walked 4 amos without tefillin. And Rav Nachman never walked 4 amos without tzitzis. Just like Rav Huna, Berei Yeshua is saying, I never walked 4 amos without a head covering. Right. But it sounds like, just like other people do walk 4 amos without tefillin, we do it all the time, so too other people walk 4 amos without a yarmulke. It sounds like it was a practice Rav Huna is very proud of. It also seems to indicate it's not lawful. I mean, it's not legislated. Look at number 12. We have a Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. Says the Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim. O Kavar Yadata, you know, has hidden. The rabbis warn us milechas from walking b'kaimas kufa in an up straight erect posture, because maloi cholar's kvod, God's glory is everywhere. Like that's the Gemara number 1. Says the Rambam, why did the rabbis warn us about this? It's liyashiv b'leiv b'nam. It's in order to settle and instill into the minds of people be'elu amaisim kulam, through all of these actions, things that the inyan asher zacharti lach, what I mentioned to you, v'hu, and that is anachnu tamid, we are always between the hands of God. V'lifnei shchinasa neilech v'noshev, we walk back and forth. It's always in front of God's presence. And therefore there's certain activities that need to demonstrate that. For example, not walking in erect posture. The Gedolei Chachmeinus, the greatest rabbis, when Nimnoim would refrain from exposing their heads. The greatest rabbis. Only them. Liyos, because the Shechina mechayfefes ala adam, the Shechina rests on a person, and covers him. And then he says, so too they wouldn't speak much for the same reason. If you feel that God's in front of you and you won't just blabber. So the Rambam says not only it's reserved for the rabbis, the greatest rabbis. So where does the Rambam get it from? Well, that's the Gemara said in number 3 clearly. Only Rav Kahana, who's a Gavra Rabbah, would cover his head. It's black and white. Or number 2, it's Surba Rabbanon had the Sudar. So all arrows seem to be pointing to this statement of the Rambam. And the truth is, this is the majority opinion. But there's a big however. Join me in number 6. This is a comment of Rabbi Yosef Kaira. It's interesting, throughout the ages, the Ashkenaz, especially the last couple centuries, last couple centuries, the Ashkenazim were more careful about wearing yarmulke than the Sephardim, as is well known. Ironically, Rabbi Yosef Kaira is going to be pushing for the yarmulke much more than the Ramah. And it's just ironic that the Sephardim were much more lenient about it. But what's critical is to figure out what exactly is Rabbi Yosef Kaira's stance on the matter. Because it's not so clear. I have 3 pieces of Rabbi Yosef Kaira in his Beis Yosef on the paper, and you'll see yourself why there's room to vacillate, go back and forth. And number 6 is Rabbi Yosef Kaira in Siman 91, Siman Tzaddik Aleph, the laws of davening. Umashakasav Rabbi, number 6. The Torah says that when you daven, v'yichas harosh, you have to cover your head. You have to cover your head when you daven.
That implies that the rest of the time you're not.
Exactly. Says Rabbi Yosef Kaira, look in the Kol Boy. He writes in Siman Yud Aleph, Kasav Haram, the Maram of Rottenburg, says the Maharam of Rottenburg, the chief of Ashkenazi Jewry in the 1200s, She'einoi asur leilach begili harosh. There's no prohibition to walk without a head covering. The Maram of Rottenburg's position is there is no prohibition to walk bareheaded. Because Kimasha Almu Beper Kol Kisvei, we saw in number 10 that Rav Huna says, I deserve reward for not walking 4 amos. Tasili, I deserve the reward. Deloi Sakin, I don't walk 4 amos with the exposed head. Midas Chassidus. The fact Rav Huna was priding himself means that this was beyond the letter of the law. So that's the Maram of Rottenburg's take. So there you have it, black and white. V'harav Rabbeinu Peretz Koster. Rabbeinu Peretz said, wait a second. Yesh limchais, I want to protest. Shaloi likanes bebeis hakned. You can't walk into shul begili harosh. Rabbeinu Peretz said, you walk into shul, you need to have a yarmulke. On the street, no. But the moment you walk in, yeah. That's Rabbeinu Peretz. Said Rabbi Yosef Kaira, I'm not done. V'Rabbeinu Yerucham. Rabbeinu Yerucham was a student of the Rosh. Kosav, he writes, B'soif Nesiv Tezayin. Rabbeinu Yerucham says, She'asu levarich, it's also to bench begili harosh. Rabbeinu Yerucham said it's also to bench bareheaded. So in other words, when we're talking about yarmulke, there's quite a few different things. There's walking in the street. The Maram says that's fine. There's walking into shul. Rabbeinu Peretz says you can't walk in bareheaded.
But street is fine.
Right. Rabbeinu Yerucham said it's also to make a bracha bareheaded, but street is fine. So where did Rabbeinu Yerucham get, why can't you make a bracha bareheaded? Where does it say in the Chumash that you can't say Hashem's name without, you have to be covered. So says the Beis Yosef, it's in Masechta Soifrim, the 14th parak. Kosuv, it says there, Poicheach, someone who has torn clothes, Hanidim Krov, you could see his legs, or Begod the Frumim, or the clothes are torn elsewhere, or Misha Roisha Megula. Maybe Poicheach is someone wearing shorts. But if somebody's skin is exposed, or Misha Roisha Megula, if your head's exposed, Peiris Shema, you can still go chazan. Peiris Shema means, back in the day, the chazan would say the brachas of Shema, and you would all listen and be yotze by listening to him. The Yeshem, but says the Masechta Seif, opinion number 2 says, Bikrov, you could see the guy's legs, or if his clothes are torn, taka peiris, he can go chazan. Avaloi beroisha megula, not if there's no yarmulke, he can't go chazan. She'ein noirasha, you're not allowed, lahoitzi azkarim, you can't say Hashem's name from your mouth. So in Masechta Seif, there's a debate if you're allowed to say Hashem's name without a yarmulke. The first opinion says, no problem, you go chazan. Now we're busy throwing hats on the chazan. According to the first opinion, no yarmulke b'chlal. No, who needs a yarmulke? The second opinion says, you know what, your clothes are torn, that's okay, but the yarmulke is a make it or break it. The yarmulke is not dispensable as far as saying Hashem's name. So says Rabbi Yosef Kaira, near it seems to me, shuhu machlokes, that apparently it's a debate if mutter levar, can you bench with an exposed head, or if it's asur. But Rabbeinu Yerucham, who said it's asur, obviously took the second opinion. Pasaki Paskin's command dom also like the one who says Asr Hachanak, and that's what we take. Then he quotes a letter of the Trumas Hadeshin. Koivoyim akluyim mikash, if you have a hat which is made out of straw, chashivui kisui, that's considered a cover for the headless balbem to daven. Aval hanochas hayad, but just to put your hand on if you have no yarmulka, to put your hand on your head, ala roish, loy choshev kisui doesn't count. You can't put your head on your hand.
Your hand on your head.
Thank you very much. Good. In order to make a bracha. The kasav, and he says the time or the reason is mishum daharosh va'yad chad gufinun. The head and body are one essence, and therefore you're not covering yourself. It's you. The ein aguf yachol lechasat. You can't cover yourself. Chassidus always quotes this, that being that the concealment of Hashem itself is Hashem, right? It doesn't really cover up. But Lafid Varv says Rabbi Yosef Chaira, according to Trumas Hadesh and Mashma, if someone else puts their hand on your head, you could make shalzeh on this guy choshev shapik is taka covering. So what do you see from here? You only need to cover your head for a bracha. Rabbi Yosef Chaira takes on the stringency of Rabbeinu Yerucham. You want to make a bracha, you need a head covering. You can't use your hand, someone else's hand.
So when the father blesses the sons don't have to have a yarmulke.
They're not making the bracha.
My grandson asked a question. He said, if you don't have to wear a yarmulke till you have your hair cut, so what happens if you keep your hair forever and you don't get it cut? I told him I'm going to ask the rabbi.
There are many that actually, it's become fashionable to have the yarmulke on even before the upshernish, before the hair gets cut. Maybe in order just to dispel such a question. There were probably those that thought, you know what, as long as I have my long, I don't need a yarmulke. So to counter that, we started putting on the yarmulke a week before the upshern, a week before the haircut. Anyhow, from this base Yosef, it seems like there's no problem. If you look in the base Yosef number 11, you start to smell things aren't exactly as advertised. In number 11, this is a base Yosef in Siman 46. The Tur is discussing the brachas you make every morning. And the Tur quotes from the Gemara, Ki paris sudra aresha, when you put the sudr on your head, again the sudr, you say, Oite Yisrael b'sifar. Back in the day, all the brachas you say in the morning, you only did when you did the action that made you chayiv in them. You put your feet on the floor, Roy Karat Salamayim. You put on your shoes, Sha'asali Kol Sark. You put on the sudr, God crowns Yisrael b'sifar with glory. Says Rabbi Yosef Chaira, Kosav Rav David Avud Raham, says the Avud Raham, Shaloi nagu la'amra ba'oisen ha'aratzis she'eino manichim mitznefes. Right, this week we learn about the mitznefes. By the way, we're talking now about yarmulkes. A sister discussion to the yarmulke discussion is the hat discussion. Where did hats come from? Like, why by davening must I wear a hat? And once you prove to me I do need to wear a hat by davening, if you accept those proofs, do I also have to wear a yarmulke, or I can just exchange it for the hat? Because one of the reasons given is hikain likras alikechi, so you have to prepare yourself before Shemoneh Esrei. So however you would stand in front of the nobility, you got to stand in front of God. And for most of history, they would wear hats in front of nobility. So even today, it's proper to wear a hat by Shemoneh Esrei. So they're okay, but do away with the yarmulke. Like, you need a hat because it's respectful. Why don't you need a yarmulke? I only need the yarmulke to say Hashem's name because I can't be bareheaded. But I have the hat. So once I have the hat, all bases are covered. So the truth is, the Rebbe actually has a little footnote somewhere where he says the reason to have both by Shemoneh Esrei, once you have the hat, you do away with the yarmulke. Why do you have to have a double head covering? It's from this week's parsha about the Kohen Gadol. The Gemara in Chulin says the Kohen Gadol, besides for the mitzneh, besides for the hat, he also had a kisui harosh. He had a covering made out of wool, right? The tzitz had to rest also on a thread of wool. So you may have thought the thread, and that thread went over the Kohen Gadol's head. You may have thought it's a thin thread, but the Gemara in Chulin in Daf Kuf Lamed Ches says no, it was mamash a kisui, it was a covering, which means the Kohen Gadol had a double head covering. And that's the source that although you have a hat, to keep the yarmulke on by Shemoneh Esrei. Anyhow, but we're not talking about hats. We're talking strictly about yarmulkes today.
Of course we talk about that. Thank you very much.
The Kohen Gadol?
Yeah.
No, fakir, the tzitz had to be on a psilt chelis.
So the Rebbe is
It had to
giving
be,
us
there was no other
compliment
choice.
that all of us are worthy of being a Kohen Gadol.
That's right. We strive to be 100%.
Try to be like a Kohen.
So you're very normal now.
That's the Abar Benel who says the Kohen Gadol would bring every day a carbon made out of flour, which is the poor man's carbon.
Noblesse oblige.
Oblige.
So the Abar Benel said is to teach the Kohen Gadol, the carbon you bring is that of a poor man. Don't get too hoardy about your position. And on the flip side is to teach every poor person that your flour, don't be embarrassed of your flour carbon. That's what the Kohen Gadol
That's
brings.
the noblesse oblige. That's right there.
Exactly. So you have that that message.
Right.
Anyhow, says the Beis Yosef, quoting the Abar Benel, in some lands they don't wear the mitznefes. So since they don't wear this mitznefes, this hat, they don't make the bracha. Lefi, because says Abar Benel, bracha zu niskana, the bracha was made because they would crown themselves with the mitznefes. So in those places where they didn't wear it, they didn't make the bracha. Now, does that mean they were bareheaded? Again, there's two ways of reading this. Does it mean if you don't have this mitznefes head covering, you have nothing? Or it means they still had a basic covering, but the bracha was for the mitznefes, right? Again, you have this ambiguity. Va'achshav, and now nogu kol ha'olam la'amra. But says Avudraham, nowadays everybody says it. Afapi, even though she'einam oitrim mitznefes, even though they don't have the mitznefes. Now, hang on a second. He's saying that now, even though there's no mitznefes, that fancy hat, we still make the bracha that God crowns us with glory. Well, bareheaded? What, does he disagree with Rabbeinu Yerucham about making a bracha with your bare head? Maybe he does. We'll see, there are those that disagree. Or maybe this is clearly telling you that besides for the mitznefes, there is a head covering. Okay. Now says the Beis Yosef, v'chein da'as ha-Tosfos. Shekas what Tosfos says about the bracha oitisah b'sifara, kiparis sudra al reishe, when you put the sudra on your head, v'hu adin l'chol koi v'l'chol kisui. So Tosfos says kol kisui. Tosfos seems to be saying the bracha was made for any head covering, not just for a stage 2. Right? The Avudraham was mashman, it's mitznefes, which may have been stage 2. Tosfos seems to say any sudr, any hat, or the whole kisui, any head covering. Sounds like they slept without a yarmulke, and when you got up, you put on the yarmulke. The El Yerabba brings from the Shalah about wearing a yarmulke at night as well. Wearing a yarmulke at night as well. And I think that's where the minhag comes from. The minhag of Chassidim to keep it on throughout the night. When my father was the head counselor in Gaon Yisrael in Parksville, upstate New York, so way back over 40 years ago, so Rabbi Chodakov told him that I want you to appoint someone, hire somebody, that their role is that throughout the night they walk through the bunkhouses,
And put back the yarmulke.
and anyone whose yarmulke fell off, you put it back on.
Okay, so my grandfather had the solution. He had a hat
Glue.
with a string that he tied on his chair.
While he slept,
Why he slept every night.
Wow.
was it made
But
out of
also,
pizza?
no, it was made of some white material. I don't remember what. But it also in Hungary was very cold. So
You know, he got Mendelbaum, was the guy to go around. He went around, and that was his Israel. And my father said they never knew, was this a directive from the Rebbe or from Rebbe Chod? You never know. But it was definitely something very important. The councils made sure the kids went to sleep with the yarmulke, but at 2, 4 in the morning, Mendelbaum would go around.
It's amazing that you're saying it was 40 years ago. Because 15 years ago, I don't remember they doing it to me.
Okay. You were there.
I was in Israel. Also in Quebec, they didn't do it either.
Aha.
Sent from here to Quebec.
That's right.
I was sleeping.
Listen, how do you know?
So I wake up in the morning and see what Bayam is.
Okay, good. Anyhow, but it sounds from this Tosfos that if someone slept without a yarmulke or it fell off, but in the morning when you put on when you put it on, you make the bracha oitei so b'sifara. Because he says whether it's a sudur or a hat or any covering, sounds like your head was completely exposed. Venirali says the Beis Yosef, shetam brachas. Why do we make this bracha oitei so b'sifara? You make it every day because it's asur lahalach begilui arosh. Because it's asur to walk bareheaded. Till now you thought it was just a pious act. This is where everything changed. He says, no. Kedemashma perakol kisrei. That's the Gemara number 10. Rav Huna Breid Rav Yeshua said, I deserve reward because I didn't walk 4 amos without a head covering. The Maram of Rothenburg said that Gemara is talking about pious activity. The Beis Yosef says, no, I really think that Gemara is a source of halacha. Which is very strange, because then why is Rav Huna saying, oh, I did something so remarkable? If he's doing bare halacha, he could have quoted any mitzvah, any halacha that he did. The Maram of Rothenburg clearly quoted this Gemara and said it's talking about, and the Beis Yosef quoted that in number 6, that the Maram of Rothenburg, in number 6, the 3rd line, it's the same Gemara, page 118 in Shabbos, and there, the Maram of Rothenburg said that's talking about Midas Chassidus, pious act, and here the Beis Yosef says, no, that's my source that it's Asur. Very strange, very strange. Then the Beis Yosef says, so if it's also to walk bareheaded, now you understand why when you cover your head you make a bracha. Because this is an essential, it's a requirement. Then he says, Va'afilu, then Beis Yosef says, it's true, I didn't forget, I know that many hold it's a discretionary act. Even the Divrei HaMafarish, those that say, it's not also to go begili roish, bareheaded, mikal makom, but they still admit Midas Chassidus, it's pious act not to go bareheaded. Like I'll tell you in Siman Sadik Aleph, which we saw in number 6, b'siyata d'shmaya. So that's still reason enough to make a bracha because it's an act which is a pious act.
On the contrary, making a bracha implies that you don't wear it 24 hours a day. Because if you wear it all the time, then you don't make a bracha.
So maybe at night he fell up.
So you don't make a bracha.
Okay, but during the day, let's say during the day, let's put the night on this, but during the day, you wear it during the day?
So, but you don't take it off. If you don't take it off, then you don't put it on.
Why you take it up?
That's it. You make the bracha in the morning. But
put it on and you take it whatever.
That's true, good point.
I don't know, you take it off, you're playing sports, take it off, you're going swimming, like what?
Shower.
There's many reasons you take it off. Who said you have to put it back on? Anyhow, he quotes a Zoyar in the Raya Mehemna in Nosoi, Bar Nash, Osur Lemezel 4 Amos Begiluya Deresha. The Gemara number 1 did not use the word Osur by walking bareheaded, but the Zoyar does. The Zoyar said it's Osur to walk 4 Amos exposed because Mistalki Chaim, your life will leave you. So says the Beis Yosef, since Yisrael Hey Mamitzuvin Bekach, since we're mitzuvah, to fear God, and one of the ways is through a head covering, like the story with Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak when he was a kid. So we bench oitei sol, that God crowns us, and we use lashon itrud. It's a crown, but it's a derech maila that we're very proud of this command that we have. So here the Beis Yosef mentions 2 opinions: either it's also to go, or it's just Midas Chassidus. So now already we see it's not so posh, it could be it's Asr. I have over here a letter of the Maharshal. In number 7, 8, and 9 are excerpts from a letter of the Maharshal. Anyone that learns the discussion of Yarmulka reads this letter of the Maharshal, it's letter 72. It's a crucial letter. The Maharshal is extremely liberal. He wants to completely dismiss Yarmulka, even to make a bracha from anything. He wants to completely dismiss Yarmulka. That at most Yarmulka is a pious act. And he quotes in number 7 from a medrash. He said there's a medrash rabbah, said Rabrecha, I'll just read it outside because they're hard letters. Imagine you had a king that sent a decree to a certain country. What do? They have to stand up. They have to take off their hats out of respect. And they read the letter, the royal edict, Be'emo, Be'ira, and they're shaking. But God tells the Yidden, I want you to read Shema, but I'm not going to make you crazy. You don't have to stand. You don't have to take off your hats. I'm not going to demand for you to expose your heads like other people would do out of respect. I'll allow you to have your head cover. That's what the Medrash says. So says the Marshal halfway through number 7, it's clearly mashma. There's no isser to have your head uncovered, even by saying Shema, by saying a bracha, by saying Hashem's name. And fakert, it may have been better, but God says, I'm not going I'm not going to be machmir on you to take it off. I'll let you keep it on. You understand? You hear the leniency over here? You're allowed to keep your yarmulke on when you say Shema. A leniency. So says the Marshal, really I would allow you to be bareheaded. What if you want to be machmir and take off your yarmulke for the bracha? Even better. Can you imagine? But he said, what could I do? The rabbis before me said it's asur, so I'm not going to disagree by a bracha. But what I am perplexed is that now they said not only it's asur by a bracha, but about walking in the street. They say it's asur to be bareheaded when you're not davening. And I don't know where they got it from. He says, I don't know where they got it from. Because we don't find any prohibition to be uncovered with the head. Only a woman has that prohibition. Has to wear a yarmulke. If a woman wants to cover the yarmulke, gesund her head. But a man, there's no isser. The only thing it is pious act. Yeah, that we have tons of Gemaras. Yeah. Rav Huna Ber Yeshua prides himself. And we have Rav Kahana, and we have big Rabbanim, like the Rambam says, the greatest rabbis. Yeah. He's not going to argue on that. Midas Chassidus is not to go 4 amos with an exposed head. And Dafka walking 4 amos like it's brought in Kol Kisvei. The Marshal holds less than 4 amos is not even Midas Chassidus. We're going to see a big debate about that. The Marshal holds really in essence, yarmulke is all out. The whole thing is Midas Chassidus. Even to daven. The rabbis before me said you got to wear it when you daven. Right? Rabbeinu Peretz says even to walk into a shul, right? Even the Maram of Rothenburg only allowed you to walk, but didn't. Rabbeinu Yerucham Asher making a bracha. So the Marshal says I'm not going to shake the boat completely. I'm not going to turn the boat over. I'm willing to shake the boat, not capsize the boat. So to make a bracha, you need the yarmulke. But walking in the street, come on. The Marshal says in the Gemara, it's clear, 4 amos. And the beyond is Midas Chassidus. Less than 4 amos is bechlal nothing. Like if somebody's walking, they want to take off their yarmulke for a second to I don't know, they got something stuck in their head, and while they're doing that, they walk 3 amos. It's not a problem. Bechlal not a problem. The issue is only 4 amos, and even then, it's only Midas Chassidus, only pious act. That's what he says. And in number 8, let's read what he says then. He says, look in the Gemara in Kiddushin, it said it's asur to walk with an erect posture. It doesn't say the word asur by the yarmulke. Look at number 1, it's asur to walk in an erect posture. Rav Huna Ber Yeshua wouldn't walk 4 amos bareheaded. It doesn't say asur. Look at number 8, mashma dafka, says the Marshal. It's dafka b'koimus kuf, an erect posture is asur. But begili a rosh, exposed head, there's no isser. Rav Huna was machmir on himself because Midas Chassidus. And says the Marshal, look at these days, it's the opposite. Look at all these people walking around with an erect posture. Oh, but I'm wearing a yarmulke. Chacham, the yarmulke is Midas Chassidus. The erect posture is... Look what he says, it's the opposite. In number 8, the 3rd line. You ever saw someone careful not to have an erect posture? People walking up. He says the hoardy and the wealthy, holchim the tuyei gar, and they walk with their throats outstretched. But begili aroshin is harim. But they're so careful. Not because of Chassidus, but they think that that's basic Judaism. They think the yarmulke is basic Judaism. But walk as if you own the world. They got it all wrong. They got it all wrong. You're better off without the yarmulke, walking like a humble man. So you have 2 people walking. One person walks with the big yarmulke as if he owns the world. The other guy, no yarmulke, but he walks in a humble. That guy has it right. That guy actually got the message of Judaism.
Is he just trying to make the point about the Kremus Kufa and the yarmulke's coming in on the side?
No. The whole thing's about the yarmulke. The Teshuva is about... He has a few other things. He writes that, I heard there's a huge rabbi in our times who learns a whole day without a yarmulke. This is 500 years ago in Poland. He said, I heard there's a big rabbi who learns a whole day without a yarmulke. Imagine you heard that today. Big Rosh Hashiva, big Rosh Kollel is a big guy. He learns a whole day, no yarmulke. He comes to Shir, no yarmulke. Right? Imagine the scandal.
Do you think it's possible because he was indoors and he considers the roof as...
Very good. So the Marshal discusses that in his letter. That's a great point. Great point.
Germans.
Right. Exactly. So the Marshal says, in theory, the Marshal says, boy. The Marshal says, really, I think I like it, but Marshal says it's a bad idea. So the Marshal, the rabbi always has people watching him. Even when you're inside. The Marshal says you think you're inside, people are watching you. What do you think is going to happen if you're busy learning a whole day without a yarmulke? The world is, it's not going to end well. You're going to be, is it right? The masses don't know how to take it well because we've been wrongly influenced to think that yarmulke is basic law, says the Marshal. So Marshal says, if you're a big rabbi, I think you should wear the yarmulke just because, right, even though the Rambam says in number 12, big rabbis b'chlal have to wear out of an awe of God. Marshal seems to be saying a big rabbi should wear it while he learns just because of the impact it'll have on the people on the street if they find out. But then he has number 9, look what he says in number 9. Marshal is not done. The achshav ani agana, I want to belittle the embarrassment of the Ashkenazim, of the Germans. Anybody here German roots? I am going to wipe the floor officially. The achshav ani agana is klein agala. No, I think that's, I'm sorry. It looks like a nun. I think we're missing some ink. It's probably supposed to be agala. I will reveal the klein Ashkenazim. I'm going to expose the embarrassment of the Ashkenazim. Okay, the big reveal. Bavadai, someone drinks yayin nesach b'maloyin in an inn shel goyim. He says you have these Ashkenazi Yidden, they go to hotels and they're drinking wine. That's there, right? And they eat fish which are cooked in their kalim. And the machmir, and the guy that thinks, no, I did my rabbinical supervision, he believes the pundika, he believes the owner of the hotel that loy bishluba, that nothing was cooked in these kalim before, and therefore the kalim are kosher. And ein choshelav, they don't question the guy. Ein boid kinachrov, they don't search the guy. In other words, you have these Ashkenazi Yidden, they travel for business, they go to hotels, and they not care about what they eat. V'noigim by covered, and they give the hotel covered if it's an ashir and a takif and a strong-minded person. But abid, they're wearing the yarmulke. But someone who eats and drinks behechsher. Then you have another guy who's very careful about it. He brings his own food to the hotel. But he's gilui roish. He doesn't have a yarmulke. He's a oisvarf. Hayotoysin oisay.
By the way, that's the truth.
So the person that's not careful with what they eat, but they have a yarmulke, noigim by covered, we treat him with honor, and especially if he's well-to-do and is an important person. So the noigim by covered doesn't mean the owner of the hotel. It means the person that conducts himself in that way, that is careful, does not care about what he eats, but he has the yarmulke. The other guy's so care about what he eats, but he doesn't have the yarmulke. Toisin oisay, this lotzum lachazif is an apikoris. So he's very upset. But the Marshal said, no, but since this is the reality we live in, every rabbi should wear a yarmulke, because the masses will misinterpret it as leniency in Judaism. Al-Kain, therefore, the Chacham with his eyes on his head, be careful, be careful that the masses don't pounce upon you, that you don't have a yarmulke. So the Marshal couldn't be clearer that the yarmulke thing is really just a scandal. The whole thing was Midas Chassidus. It was blown out of proportion. The fact that today the yarmulke is a benchmark, if someone's frum or not, in the eyes of the Marshal is so ludicrous, and that, he spends his whole letter really fascinating. So who do we have so far that hold us a bit of an Isser? The only one was the Beis Yosef, who threw it in a number 11, and he quotes it from a Gemara which seems to indicate nothing of the sort. Let's quickly go to the next page, number 11. I'm sorry, no, it doesn't matter. We're on the next page. Yeah, don't ask too many questions. Don't ask too many questions. This is a third piece of the Beis Yosef. And this is where the Beis Yosef really turns everything around. And the Tzemach Tzedek very much bases his opinion on this Beis Yosef. So you have to learn it. It's a Beis Yosef in the laws of tzitzis. The Tur in number 11, the bold words is quoting from the Tur. Mechasa roisha, you cover your head after you wear the talus. Make sure you cover your head. Shelo yehei begilui roish, you shouldn't be without a head covering. It sounds from the Tur, we're talking about someone put on a talus, and he has nothing on his head. So the Tur says, cover your head with the talus. In order, you shouldn't be sitting there bareheaded. So how'd the guy make the bracha on the talus in the first place? So I guess when you make the bracha, you put the talus on your head. Okay. So maybe the guy came to shul, he's not in shul, he is in shul or whatever. It sounds like the guy has no yarmulke, has no head covering. So the Torah says when you sit there with a talus around your shoulders and an open head, cover your head. That's a simple reading. And the Vilna Gaon is, by the Vilna Gaon's take on this whole matter, the Vilna Gaon pushes big time, yarmulke is not an obligation. It's only Midas Chassidus, it's only a pious act. There's very much like the Marshal, and he quotes all the Gemaras we saw before, and the Vilna Gaon, when it's actually the Vilna Gaon is in the Siman Ches of Shulchan Aruch, discussing tzitzis on this very issue. And he's going to argue on this Beis Yosef. The Vilna Gaon says the words of the Torah, which the Beis Yosef begins with, the bold words, is talking about a guy sitting with a talus, with a uncovered head, exposed head. Mechaser, don't sit there like that, cover your head. Says the Beis Yosef, let me tell you what I think this means. He says, first of all, this is also from the Baal HaItur. The Baal HaItur was Rabbi Yitzchak before the Torah. Says the Beis Yosef, it seems to me to interpret the following. It doesn't mean cover your head. In order you shouldn't be completely exposed. First of all, the Beis Yosef says, the simple reading is the guy has a talus on his shoulders and his head's exposed. Says the Beis Yosef, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean the head's completely exposed. Because then what's the connection? Well, since you're wearing a talus, therefore you shouldn't have your head exposed? What's the connection to the price of tea in China? Why does the talus on your shoulders mean your head shouldn't be exposed? He says, V'oid, in addition, if the guy is no yarmulke, so what's it mean? So how did he walk to go to the bathroom? You go, right? You have to go to the bathroom before you daven. How did the guy walk more than 4 amas, right, to get to the bathroom? So some want to say within your entire house could be considered 4 amas as far as the head covering, or it's like you mentioned, the house itself, which the Marshal does talk about in his letter. Maybe the roof of the house is considered a covering. But the little yod, how the guy wash negavaser, and how did he make a bracha on a tilas yadayim begili aroish with an exposed head? So who knows? Maybe the Torah argues on Rabbeinu Yerucham. Rabbeinu Yerucham says you can't make a bracha without a yarmulke. Maybe the Torah disagrees. But the Beis Yosef finds it's ludicrous to imagine this guy sitting there with his talus on his shoulders and his head's uncovered, and the Torah says this guy has to put his talus on his head because he has nothing on his head. Can't be. It must be he already has a head covering. That's how he got to shul in the first place. That's how he made the brachas until now. Nonetheless, you need a second covering. Why? What it means is like this. Even though your head's already covered, or else you couldn't walk. How'd you walk 4 amas? But derech tznuim, those that are modest, cover their head not just with a little yarmulke. You have a hat. You have something, a real covering, a real tznius covering. Lahatul suder. Here the Beis Yosef finally says, suder can be a second head covering. All the Gemaras we saw that sounded like only rabbis wear a suder. According to the Beis Yosef, you know what that means? It's stage 2. It's already beyond the minimum requirement. Suder or a talus on their heads. And he brings a proof. One of the Gemaras we saw, the Gemara we saw in number 4, that Rav Amnuna said that because I'm not married, right, I don't have a head covering. It sounded like anyone not married walks without a yarmulke. Right? And that's taka how the Vilna Gaon wants to learn that Gemara. So says the Beis Yosef, and we'll see that Tzemach Tzedek is very much going to be based on this Beis Yosef, that the Gemara says, Rav Chisda told Rav Huna, you know Rav Amnuna is a great man, right? The same story. So Rav Huna said, okay, when he comes to you, bring him to me. He comes, and Rav Huna sees that the guy wasn't wearing a suder. So Rav Huna says, my time, and you're not wearing a suder. He says, I'm not married. And Rashi explains, the loy paris sudra, Rashi says, Rav Amnuna at that point was not wearing a sudra, like those that are married, who were accustomed to cover their head. So does that mean that if you don't have the sudra, you're mamish bareheaded? That's how many learn Rashi. Says the Beis Yosef, pshit, it's obvious that the Bachrim were not all walking around bareheaded. You wear a garter when you get married. Maybe you put on a talus. There's no such thing, you start wearing a yarmulke when you get married. Even though that's the mashmos of the Gemara in Kedushin. He says, no. Pshita loy hayu abachrim holchim begilei roish mamish, can't be. Elavad, they were talking about a suder is stage 2. A suder is something that covers your entire head. A yarmulke can be small. You know, Rab Shlomo Kluger, Rab Moshe Feinstein, I think the first tshuva, the first letter that he has is arguing with Rab Shlomo Kluger. Rav Shlomo Kluger believes a yarmulke has to cover the majority of your head. And Rav Moshe Feinstein disagrees. As long as you're wearing something that could be noticeable, if someone looks at you, even if it's small, it works. Smaller works. But either way, no one says that's to cover your whole head. A sudar is something that covers, it's something that covers your whole head. It's beyond. So says Beis Yosef, a sudar or a talus that you cover your head for tznius, that's what began after you got married. The hat, beseder, a shreimel, a specific hat. That's something else completely. Now, what's the point of wearing this more expanded head covering? Well, the more you have on your head, right? The more you're aware there's something above you. The extended covering, machnia, it subdues a person's heart, it brings you to fear of heaven. And then he quotes the Gemara in Shabbos that we saw in number 5, the story of Nachman Bar Yitzchak, that the mother told Rav Nachman, cover your head in order you should have fear of God on you. What does it sound like the Beis Yosef is doing with that story? We learned that story that it sounds like Rav Nachman, but he was the only kid walking around with a yarmulke, nobody else. So he said, no, he had a huge yarmulke. It was a glimmer, the Gemara says. It was like a cloak. All the other ones had a small one. But because he was destined to be a ganav, so his mother wanted to counter that with armory, literally on his head, a huge thing. So that's what that's what Rav Yosef Kaira does with that Gemara. He does the same thing in Kedushin with the unmarried, that when the Gemara says Sudar, it's the expanded version. So that really changes many of the Gemaras that we saw. When the Gemara says in Kedushin that Rav Kahana, only because he was a Gavra Rabbah, needed a Sudar, that means something that covers your entire head. But a smaller yarmulke to make sure your head's not exposed, that everybody wore. The Beis Yosef couldn't be clearer. And then he comes to... so he says, that's the pshat in the Tur by the talus, the kach kosov. That's why the Tur says, when the Tur says you're sitting with a talus, make sure your head's not exposed. Here, there's an extra copy over here. There's one over here. Okay. There's a set right over there. When he says, it doesn't mean the guy sitting there with the talus on his shoulder and his head's uncovered, right? Can you imagine? That's not what it means. Although the Vilna Gaon is adamant that it does mean that. But says it means, no, the kach kosov shichas betalisoi. The Tur is I know you have a yarmulke. I want you to cover your head with your talus. When you daven, you need to really look like a mensch. In order, you shouldn't be begil. Now, the Tur says cover your head so you shouldn't be exposed. Exposed is relative. It means you shouldn't be exposed from the sudar or from the talus, which the derech was to put on the kisei atachten sheberosh. So the Beis Yosef here says, wait a second. When the Tur says cover your head with the talus so you shouldn't be exposed, doesn't mean your head's exposed completely. It's exposed relatively compared to the talus. So that could help us for the Rashi we mentioned before about Rav Kahana. Rashi says Rav Kahana needed a sudar on his head, and it was worth to him 5 sloim, because if not, his head's exposed. What it means is exposed from the sudar. We said at the time, that's an interpretation in Rashi. Maybe it is, but it's based on this Beis Yosef. He said it clearly in the Tur. Fine. So that's his... so the Beis Yosef... In one place, Beis Yosef speaks how it's mutter to walk. It's only an issue about davening. Then in number 11, we saw the Beis Yosef brings 2 opinions. In this Beis Yosef, which is actually the first one that he wrote, he says very clearly his opinion. It's usher to walk more than 4 amos without a yarmulke. Fine, that's what he says. So until now, he's the only one. The Beis Yosef is against everybody else. He's against the Maram of Rottenburg. He's against Rabbeinu Yeruchim, who says only a bracha. He's against Rabbeinu Peretz, who only says walking into a shul. He's very much against the Marshal. Definitely the Rambam and the Moreh Nevuchim. But the Beis Yosef has big shoulders, right? He's not afraid. What does he write in the Shulchan Aruch? In number 12, we have Rabbi Yosef Kaira's statement in the Shulchan Aruch, and you tell me what you think it means. Says Rabbi Yosef Kaira, we're in the second number 12, on the second sheet. Asur leilech b'kaimis kuf, it's asur to walk with an erect posture. V'lo yeilech, and don't go 4 amos b'gilui harosh. It's also to walk with an erect posture. Now, by the way, our Gemara said in number 1, it's also to walk 4 amos with an erect posture. The Shulchan Aruch by the erect posture leaves out 4 amos. And so does the Tur. Very noteworthy. And then he says, but don't walk 4 amos exposed. By the exposed head, he kept the 4 amos. But he doesn't say asur. He says asur by the kaimis kufa, the erect posture. By the yarmulke, he just says lo yelech, don't go. So the Chidah understands, Rabbi Yosef Kaira holds, the erect posture is usher. The not walking is a new statement. That's not usher, that's Taka Midas Chassidus. Just like the Marshal was screaming in the letter that we saw before, that the erect posture is the real prohibition, right? And that people aren't careful about. That's how the Chidah learns this, and the Chidah says, where's it from? It's from the Gemara, because in number 1, the Gemara used the word Isser by the erect posture, not by the walking Dalaramas without a yarmulke. The Tzemach Tzedek quotes the same Shulchan Aruch, and he feels different than the Chidah. He feels V'lo Yelech means you're not allowed to. He feels that V'lo Yelech means you can't. It's not just a piece of advice, it's that you can't. Right, so they're arguing this interpretation of V'lo Yelech.
Can't still a lower level of usher. It's like a middle ground, according to the Tzemach Tzedek.
But you can't do it. Can't do it. Yeah. The truth, I told you, even by the usher, by the erect posture, someone will say, even there, usher is lav davka. So you have lots of levels here. You have usher, and then quasi usher. Then you have lo yelech, which is below, and then you have Midas Chassidus. I'm going to tell you that the Marshal holds more than 4 amas, we said before. It's Midas Chassidus not to walk more than 4 amas with an exposed head. Less than 4 amas is b'chalal, no issue at all. That's the Marshal's take. The Alter Rebbe's take is more than 4 amas, you can't. Less than 4 amas is Midas Chassidus. It's based on the Magen Avraham. In between them you have the Bach, who holds both within 4 and above 4 is all Midas Chassidus. In fact, look at the Taz in number 13. The Taz wants to know, why does the Tur in the Shulchan Aruch leave out the 4 amas by the erect posture, but they have it by the yarmulke? V'yesh Matardim says the Taz, someone to answer, the Tur says you can't walk with an erect posture less than 4 amas as a chumrah. He wanted to ask less than 4 amas. Why? Since the Gemara says it's asur 4 amas with an erect posture, so the Tur said, I want to be machmir even less than 4. But without a yarmulke, the Gemara doesn't say asur. Just Rav Huna wouldn't do it. So the whole thing is a chumrah. So therefore, the Tur in the Shulchan Aruch couldn't say even less than 4 amas when the Gemara didn't. But he says the Eino Nochen doesn't make sense, because how could the Tur, if the Gemara said it's also to walk 4 amas in erect posture, how could the Tur create his own chumrah? So the Taz says it must be the Tur didn't have the words 4 amas in the Gemara by the erect posture. Right, but the answer he wanted to give is maybe the erect posture is asur. The Gemara says by 4 amas. So the Tur may wants to be machmir even less. But the yarmulke is b'chal not asur. So therefore the Tur left the 4 amas the way it was. But let's just leave that on the side. Look at the Bach in number 14. The Bach says, you know what my opinion is? Well, the Bach says, my opinion is, Begilui Arosh, if your head's exposed, there's never an Isser even more than 4 amas. It's only Midas Chassidus. But Midas Chassidus, even less than 4 amas too. Erect posture, it's Asur, whether above 4, whether below 4. So the Bach's Taina, was macht er? So the Bach Taina is like, the Bach says like this, the erect posture is Asur Medina, it's Asur to walk, whether you go more than 4 amas, whether less than 4 amas. The yarmulke is always Midas Chassidus, whether below 4, whether above 4. So again, the Marshal says below 4 amas is nothing, above 4 is Midas Chassidus. The Bach says below 4, above 4 is always Midas Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe is going to say above 4 is halacha, and less than 4 is Midas Chassidus. But Al Kapanim, at this point, the only one that said that it's asur is the Beis Yosef. The Bach disagrees. He holds Midas Chassidus. The Marshal, all the sources that we saw. We're on the 2nd page. We're up to join me number 16, the Ramah. What does the Ramah have to say about this? What does the Ramah have to say about this? And then we're almost mamish by the Tzemach Tzedek, so hold on. Says the Ramah number 16, the Darchei Moshe. A very interesting lashon. Va'av ki mitzvah lishmoya al divrei Beis Yosef v'pirushay. Says the Ramah in his commentary Darchei Moshe on the Tur. There's a mitzvah to listen to the Beis Yosef. Interesting, when he argues in the Beis Yosef, left, right, and center. He's referring to what we saw in number 11, that the Beis Yosef interprets the Tur that you always wear a yarmulke, and the talus is supposed to be a second covering. He says, even though I'm a big fan of the Beis Yosef, Mikol Makom, it seems to me that when the Tur says, Umachase Roisha with the talus, in order your head shouldn't be exposed, is Kipshutai. The guy, we're talking about a guy with a talus on his shoulders and his head's completely uncovered. And therefore the Torah says, put the talus on your head. There's no yarmulke. Because below tzitzis, ein isur leilach begili arosh. Because before you have the talus on, there's taka no problem to walk bareheaded. It's only Midas Chassidus. Like I said, in the name of Raman Ottenberg. And therefore the Torah says, but when you wear tzitzis, now it's inappropriate to have an exposed head. You got to cover your head. So the Ramah disagrees with the Beis Yosef. All of this kind of change in number 15 when the Taz came. And the Taz says, V'nirali, it seems to me number 15, Yesh Isru Gomer. I think these days it's a complete prohibition to walk with an exposed head. Mitam Acher, for a different reason, different than anything mentioned. Since nowadays there's a choik amongst the goyim. The goyim take off their head coverings as a sign of respect. Oisen kain tamid. They come home, when they sit down at the table, they perkin mal, they take off their hat. Whenever they want to show respect, they take off their hat. Their custom is always to expose their head for proper activities, for anything. The moment they're doing a proper activity, they take off their heads. So the Jew is to be the opposite. You can't follow their. For us not to have a head covering is following the path of the goyim. For sure over here that we have a strong reason to wear a yarmulke, that it brings Yiras Shamayim, like the story of Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. And then
This is their way of showing respect.
right. So we can't be bareheaded. All the more so that wearing a yarmulke brings a person to Yiras Shamayim, but to be exposed is mamash chukas hagoyim. And he said he thinks it's an isur gomer. It's an isur gomer. And then he quotes the Mer Nevuchim that he saw. So he finished 2 lines on the bottom. He says, Vada yarchik atzmai bazeh. You should be marchik more than other chukim of the goyim. Alva mikol makom. Then he says like this, the marshal b'chla. We said the marshal we saw was completely. He said the whole yarmulke is a fraud, right? But the marshal also holds another leniency, that even if you want to cover your head by a bracha, you could use your own hand. The Trumas Hadeshin holds you can't. The marshal holds you can. So says the Taz, when the marshal says that even if you want to be machmir, and the marshal holds really even for a bracha, your head could be exposed. You want to be machmir, you could use your own hand. Right? Marshal is very liberal. Says the Taz about using your own hand. I agree to the marshal to get out of the issue of chukas hagoyim, but not for a bracha. For a bracha, you can't use your own hand for the reason of the Trumas Hadeshin. You can't cover yourself with yourself. But I agree with the marshal, your own hand would work to remove yourself from the issue of b'chukaseyim lo yisei leichu. That's the Taz. So he brings a whole new thing to the table. The Alter Rebbe brings another point, which is tznius. The Alter Rebbe says once the custom is to cover your head, then if you don't, you're exposing part of your body that's supposed to be covered. And that's also a halacha of tznius. At least the Rabbanon is a halacha to keep your. So now we come to the Vilna Gaon and the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Vilna Gaon, it's in his commentary Bir Hagra on Shulchan Aruch and Siman Ches, and the same place where the Beis Yosef in number 11 was. And the Vilna Gaon is a long piece, which is uncharacteristic for him. The Vilna Gaon writes extremely terse and cryptic. It's pretty much all Mara Mekaymus, Rogachover style. But here he has quite a long paragraph quoting many, many sources of Gemaras to prove the fact that a yarmulke, right, for a bracha maybe, that we saw the Masechta Seifrim, but b'chlal walking, it's not necessary. It's not necessary. And the Tzemach Tzedek has a couple of letters where he goes through this almost the entire beer of the Gra, proof after proof after proof, and dismantling the arguments of the Vilna Gaon, really tackling the issue, very much pushing the idea that a halacha is mandatory, it's required. It's required. Now, mentioning the Tzemach Tzedek and the Vilna Gaon, I have to mention the following. That in one place, in the Tzemach Tzedek Sefer Piskei Dinim, it's actually about a talus. He quotes something from the Vilna Gaon, and in the versions we have today, he says ve'einot tshuva, that the Vilna Gaon response is not a response. However, in the first print it said something else. That Tzemach Tzedek says that unfortunately I wasn't able to understand Lo Yizochisi Lahavin Dvorav HaKadoshim. I wasn't able to understand the holy words of the Vilna Gaon. That's what it said in the first print. The print we have today doesn't say that. What happened? Well, it depends who you ask. In number 17, I have from the Sefer Gaon HaChassid Mevilna. I'll tell you what the Litvishers say, and I'll tell you what the Rebbe said, and it turned into a war. It really got messy. In number 17, this is from the Sefer Gaon HaChassid, the Chassid of Vilna. Rab Menachem Mendel of Lubavitch, the author of the Tzemach Tzedek, this is a book about the Vilna Gaon and his greatness. So it says here that Tzemach Tzedek had tremendous respect for the Vilna Gaon and his Sfarim. Uleitim Kravis, and very often Maskir B'Sifrei, the Tzemach Tzedek mentions the opinions of the Vilna Gaon. Although sometimes he argues with him Kedarka Shel Torah, that's fine, arguing is fine. But when he brings the Grob and Egeya Atifas Ataba Ramatalis, who Mary points out, V'anoichi ba'ani, I in my affliction, we're in number 17, I wasn't zoichet to understand his holy words. That's what it said. It did say that in the first printing. Then, now this is the Litvishers who are commenting. B'marbis hasfarim, in most books of the Madur Rishona, even in the first printing, some of them had this line written, that Tzemach Tzedek said, I in my humility cannot understand his holy words. But in many books of the first printing, this was taken out. And something else was put in, where he quotes the Vilna Gaon and he says, Ve'ei not Teshuva, that Vilna Gaon's response is not a response. Boy Sudar Aket, where they have this piece at the talis without these special words. Rather it says, Ei not Teshuva, that he dismisses the Vilna Gaon. And then they say, Nebuch, Maduras, Achronis, all the later prints have all been copied from the Nusach, which is lacking that title of respect. So it sounds like they're lamenting that the Tzemach Tzedek wrote this beautiful title. Someone was upset, took it out, and ever since then they've been printing the one that without it.
Is it true?
Well, the Rebbe has a number of letters, 3 letters, maybe more, where he discusses this issue. And the Rebbe, you can hear him screaming in the letters. You can hear him screaming in the letters. And he says, I heard from the Frierdiker, I'll tell you what happened. He says that Tzemach Tzedek's Sforim were printed after the Rebbe Marash passed away, before the Rebbe Rashab became Rebbe. 10 years, he didn't officially become Rebbe. It was known as the Dark Days, the Finstere Tag in Lubavitch, the Dark Days in Lubavitch. And someone was printing the Tzemach Tzedek. It was in the hands of Misnagdim that were printing it. So somebody, the Tzemach Tzedek originally wrote about the Vilna Gaon's theory or explanation that he gives or proof that he brings, Einot Teshuva, that Tzemach Tzedek was dismissing it. But the printer, who was a Litvisher, was, I guess, maybe offended, so he wrote this very nice line that Tzemach Tzedek said exactly, Lo yizoch ba'ani, my humility, I wasn't zoich lahavin. So the Rebbe says, you know what happened? Some of the copies of the new book started coming to Lubavitch, and some Chassidim saw it, they're like, Tzemach Tzedek never wrote this. So they quickly went to the printing place, and they stalled to make sure that the rest of the versions would have the way it originally was.
They turned it around.
They turn it around. So they say the nusach that we have today is Nebuch, Leider, the copy of the one that was tampered with. When Fakir, the Rebbe says the nusach we have today is the true one. It was others that tampered. That's what the Rebbe wrote in some letters. Then a fellow, a professor, an academic, wrote a piece accusing the Rebbe of changing history.
On this?
Yeah, saying that's not what happened. And Baruch Hashem, Rav Munshine, who was a great scholar and academic, wrote a long piece. With lots of sources, scholarly, completely wiping the floor with that academic, exactly. So he was, but it was a very touchy subject. The Rebbe, besides for the story of the Rebbe, the Rebbe says, listen, the Tzemach Tzedek quotes the Vilna Gaon all the time, and he argued like anybody else. He never ever wrote such a comment anywhere. What happened was someone thought in the end of the book, I'll throw in this, because it is the end of I'll throw in the line, no one will notice. The Rebbe says that Tzemach Tzedek's heart was the heart of a lion. And in fact, we're going to see over here about the tzitzis issue, about the yarmulka issue, that on each, he of course he respects the Vilna Gaon as a scholar, but the way that Tzemach Tzedek, he was like a lion, and therefore he attacks, he pounces. Although in one place that Tzemach Tzedek does write about the Shagasarya, that my whole body shakes to question the Shagasarya, that the Shas was in front of his eyes like a Shulchan Aruch, and he uses incredible terminology about the Shagasarya. Right, but so it's about the Shagasarya, the Vilna Gaon, not.
But that's not saying I wasn't Zoicha. That's saying it's beautiful, but I'm still...
No, he said my whole body shakes in front of... No. But but he never... No, so why would he use about the Shagasarya, not the Vilna Gaon? So there's the Reb Chaim of Volozhin was a student of both. Reb Chaim Volozhin was a student originally of the Shagasarya, then the Vilna Gaon. And apparently he said that the Vilna Gaon said the Shagasarya doesn't focus enough on the depth of Pshat. Gets too lost in Pilpul. And the Shagasarya told Reb Chaim Volozhin, the Vilna Gaon, he limits himself to the depth of Pshat. He doesn't allow himself to explore the world of Pilpul. Anyhow, so, who are we to measure between the two? But it's just interesting that the Rebbe said that Tzemach Tzedek wouldn't use such a term about the Vilna Gaon when he did use similar in one place against.
It's not so much world.
No, I think it's greater.
I'm shaking, but I'm still arguing.
That's
saying I'm not Zoicha. I'm not Zoicha means the...
No, Loizich is a term people... The Rebbe uses that term about the Noid. The Rebbe uses about the Noid Yehuda. That Divrei Noid Yehuda, Tzrichim Iyun, the words of Rabbi Yehuda need to be analyzed for someone on my Le'ish Asher Kamoini. A very, very humble terminology.
It's not saying I'm not Zoicha to get it. That's a level.
No, it is. Le'ish Asher Kamoini Nebuch. No, that's what it means. I wasn't Zoicha. What it means. Anyhow, so here we go. Last page. Let's do this quick. Last page. So the Vilna Gaon's tinus are very clear. It's based on everything we've seen. I mean, basically, this whole shir was speaking on behalf of the Vilna Gaon. That, Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchok was the only kid walking around with a yarmulke. Rav Kano was a Gavra Rabbi, he had to have a Sudar, nobody else. Rav Amnuna says those Bochrim don't cover their heads. We saw by the story of the Shadim that the demons told this guy that because you have a Sudar, we see you're a rabbi. The Gemara never said it's also to walk with an exposed head. Right? All of the proofs seem to be very clear. So, let's do this quick. In number 18, there's a Maharsha that the Tzemach Tzedek quotes a few times and says, hang on a second. The Maharsha, by the story of Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, says, you think he's the only kid with the yarmulke? B'shar inshi nami yarminin, says in number 18, the Maharsha, on the end of Masechta Shabbos. By everyone we say, boy, you need kisri rosh. The Maharsha said everyone should be covering their head because the Shechin is above your head. So what's the Chiddush of Nachman Bar Yitzchak? Every kid had a yarmulke. And you know what his answer is? The Ikala Meimar, his mother was medaktik to cover his head with a more expanded head covering, in order he should have more kovid rosh, be more subdued because of fear, and a fear of Hashem. He shouldn't be a ganav, and that's why it says that what happened when he was under the date palm, the glima fell from on top of his head. Glima is a cloak. Va'anan, we say the rabbis used to have a prisa sudar on their heads. And he quotes, the Gemara in Shabbos says, sudar is soid Hashem lideyov. Because a rabbi has the secrets of Hashem, since rabbis would wear a sudar, which by the way is another riot to the Vilna Gaon, only rabbis wore a sudar. Sudar is from soid Hashem lirev, because the rabbi who wears a sudar has the secrets of Hashem. But the Maharsha is proving that means a rabbi wore a sudar. Sudra Soid Hashem Lireya, fine. And then he quotes the story we saw about the demons in number 2. Sudre Demar Rabban. The Maharsha is saying rabbi used to wear a sudar, like a handkerchief on their head. So why is Rav Nachman Yitzchak has a glimi, he has a cloak on his head? It must be that his mother was moisif to cover the glima, which is more than a sudar, in order he should have more kovid rosh, because of what the astronomers had told about a son being a ganav. What do you see from the Maharsha? Above Sudar is glima. Right? That's what he's proving. And the fact that this boy had a glima means that's what was unique. He had this cloak on his head. Everyone else may have had a yarmulke. Now the Beis Yosef wanted to say that even Sudar is already stage 2. There's a yarmulke to cover your head. Then there's a sudar, and now we're learning a glimas above that. Which is a little bit confusing, because if every kid just had a regular yarmulke, why couldn't Rav Nachman's mother just up it one notch and give him a sudar? Like, why up it 2 notches? And the Mashna is not differentiating between a sudar and a yarmulke, just a sudar and a glima. But we did see in the Beis Yosef to differentiate between a yarmulke and a sudar, which was pivotal for us. Because if you say sudar is already stage 2, then it takes away many of the rayos of the Vilna Gaon. All those Gemaras that said that only rabbis wear a sudar, yeah, that's stage 2. But everyone had a basic yarmulke.
Could it be that the yarmulke is the yarmulke and a sudar are the 1 and 2? A glima, it's not respectful for a kid to wear a hat like a rav. He's a little boy on the street. You don't put a shtreimel on his head.
But the Mashar is saying the reason she upped the
turban.
The Mashar is saying
It's a level 2 for kids.
I understand the argument, but the Mashar is saying she went from 2 to 3. She went from sudar to glima in order he should have more kavod rosh, not because he can't wear the rabbi's hat. That's not the reason that he gives.
That's why she went to stage.
Yeah, but okay. So you're saying that she wouldn't be enough. No, that she had to go to the extreme.
She saw the guy.
I thought you were saying she couldn't do number 2 because that's a rabbi's attire.
You don't put a shtreimel on a kid's head.
She did.
She's saying
she's saying something else.
No, but then
But why not?
Then the Mashar is just really discussing why he wore a glima and not just a yarmulke like other kids. No, why mention sudar b'chlal? Sudar has nothing to do with the discussion.
Because sudar's been the talk for the entire time since the Gemara.
Let's get
okay, fine. Okay. Order. So comes at Tzemach Tzedek. Let's see a few things that he says. First of all, number 20, he wants to blow us out of the park. The Tzemach Tzedek says, wait a second. You make a bracha on a yarmulke. Oiter Yisrael b'sifara, right? We saw that from the Gemara and Brachas, from the Torah. He says, but wait a second. You don't make a bracha on a minig. It's an incredible argument that nobody else brings up. There's a huge sugi about making a bracha on a minig, which we've discussed in the past. But says the Tzemach number 20, don't you know the Gemara in Sukkah? When you bang the arava on Hoshana Rabbah, you don't make a bracha. The Gemara said it's a minig of the Nevi'im. Even though it's from the Nevi'im, it's a minig. You're supposed to follow the Nevi'im. It's a Midas Chassidus to follow Nevi'im. But you don't make a bracha. If a yarmulke is only Midas Chassidus, and it's not from the Nevi'im, how could you make Oiter Yisrael b'sifara every day in the yarmulke? Ken is zayin. And even on Halal on Rosh Chodesh, right, the Sfardim don't make a bracha. Right, because on Rosh Chodesh, Halal is only a minig. You can't make a bracha on a minig, only Rabbeinu Tam or the Baalei Tosfos allow you. And even those that allow you to make a bracha on Rosh Chodesh and Halal, it's because Halal in essence is an obligation on Yom Tov. So when you do the almost full Halal Rosh Chodesh, you can also make a bracha. But how are you making a bracha on a covering on the head if there's no mitzvah? So in the last line of number 20 it says, Vaday mashma, it's a mitzvah, and it's a chiyuv more than Halal on Rosh Chodesh. Or else how could you make a bracha? It's fascinating. No one goes down this, as far as I know, no one before Tzemach Tzedek went down this line of, because Oiti So B'Sifara is, it's one of the brachas you make in the morning, you're praising Hashem. It's not really like a bracha on a mitzvah. It's not really the same as a bracha on Halal. It's not a bracha on a mitzvah. Okay, but, right. No, yeah, emes. But the Beis Yosef said in number 11, the reason why you make a bracha on the yarmulke, why you make a bracha on anything that we're able to breathe, there's so many things that we can make a bracha on. The yarmulke was because there's a mitzvah shaboy. So the Tzemach Tzedek must be saying, so you can't compare it to B'kei Chivim. The reason you make Oiti So is because of the mitzvah shaboy. But you don't make a bracha on Halal. On Halal Rosh Chodesh there was a shaila. And here everybody does it. It must be the mitzvah here is even greater. That's what he's saying. The chiyuv must be greater. A very interesting argument. Yeah. In number 19, okay, the Tzemach Tzedek says, the Vilna Gaon's big proof, one of his big proofs, was from the Gemara in number 10. Rav Huna B'reid Rav Yeshua said, I deserve reward because I never walked more than 4 amos without a yarmulke. Says the Vilna Gaon, it sounds like there was a special custom. Most people would walk more than 4 amos bareheaded. Says the Tzemach Tzedek, so V'Tzoyin the Vilna Gaon said, it sounds like the fact that Rav Yeshua said, Teisel I deserve, mashma, it's only Midas Chassidus, there's no prohibition. He says, I don't understand the Vilna Gaon saying at all. The Pirish Teisili means like this. Someone says it's going to say it like this. To walk an hour without a yarmulke, for sure asur. To sit in your place without a yarmulke, for sure asur. The shaila is, what about yarmulke falls off, walking 10 feet to get it? That's the Midas Chassidus of Rav Yeshua, that I wouldn't walk 4 amas without a yarmulke. But 100 amas, or sitting for a half hour without a yarmulke, that's law. That's what he says. He says, the Pirish Teisili, which Taka proves it's only Midas Chassidus, that I agree with the Vilna Gaon. That's on the fact that he would never walk 4 amas exposed. But to sit Meshach Zman with an exposed head, that's also Medina. Rav Huna, Bereid Rav Yeshua was Moisif, that I wouldn't even go 4 amas, which could take 3 seconds, with an exposed head. But that doesn't mean the whole yarmulke is Midas. I agree to the Vilna Gaon that Teisili means it's Midas Chassidus. And the proof is that same Gemara said, Rav Sheshis and Rav Nachman said, oh, I deserve a reward because I wear tefillin or tzitzis. And Rashi said there, everyone wears tefillin and tzitzis, but these guys wouldn't go 4 amas without it. It's an extreme. So too said the Tzemach Tzedek, because Rav Huna was an extreme. He never went 4 amas without it.
Makes sense.
But to go on a prolonged walk without a yarmulke, or to sit for a while without a yarmulke, that's for sure usher. That's one of the big arguments he has. Because this Gemara number 10 was really the source that it's just Midas Chassidus, and the Tzemach Tzedek spins the whole thing on its head. Fine. Another thing is, in number 23, he quotes an Aruch. Fascinating. What the word Sudr means. He said we got the whole Sudr wrong. Uba Aruch Erech Sudr Hevi, the Aruch, right, who was Reb Nosson of Rome, Ma'asha'arm in the early 1000s. When the Gemara says in Arvei Psachim, when the demons said about the rabbi, you're wearing the covering of a rabbi. Says the Aruch, it says that Moshe wore a mask. The Targum Yerushalmi is Sudr. Masve is a Sudr. You know what a mask is? A mask is stage 2. A mask is not your basic covering. A masve is when you're really covering your whole head. That's what a Sudr is. So he says, Mizeh, right, this is a proof to the Beis Yosef that we saw, that when it says that the Bachrim weren't wearing Sudrim, that means a Sudr you wear for tznius. In addition to making sure your head's not exposed. Sudr is already stage 2. Just like the mask said Tzemach Tzedek, you think before Moshe had his mask, he was bareheaded? Right? The Gaon of Moshe coming with the tablets, right? Bareheaded, a long beard and bareheaded. Says Tzemach Tzedek, Chalila, Bevade, before Moshe got his masva, he wasn't walking with an exposed head. The masva covered his face, and that's what a Sudr is.
Yeah.
So that clearly tells you Sudr is already stage 2. In addition to the basic yarmulke, he shouldn't be exposed. So once you have that, it knocks off all the rayas of the Vilna Gaon. Rav Kahana needed a Sudr because the rabbis wore that. He only had a small cover like everybody else. It wasn't respectful. So it's fascinating. So once you have this Aruch, that's it. You know, all the proofs fall off. Here's another one. In number 1.
How do you know Moshe wore a yarmulke?
Is this part of the Tzemach Tzedek?
Yeah. Tzemach Tzedek. Yeah. All these are Tzemach Tzedek. In number 21, okay, let's do this outside, finish up. The Gemara says in number 21, it's in the Dorim, if somebody takes a vow upon himself, I'm not going to have any benefit from people that have hair. Then he's allowed to have benefit from bald people. What if someone says, I'm not going to have benefit from those that have black heads? So the Mishnah says, all men are included in that prohibition. It excludes women and children. Why? So the Gemara says, look at 21, 2 lines from the bottom, my timer. Anoshim, men, sometimes their heads are covered, sometimes their heads are exposed. Women's heads are always covered, tznius, and kids' heads are always exposed. So if you say, I'm not going to have benefit from someone who has black hair, it doesn't include kids, because they're considered as exposed. Women are considered covered. This terminology refers to men. The Rishonim discuss how we reached that conclusion. There's a Ran there, you can check it up. The point is, the Gemara says clearly men have a choice. Sometimes heads are covered or not. So the Vilna Gaon quotes this Gemara. He quotes this Gemara, you see? And it's mashma completely exposed. It doesn't just mean you don't have the Sudr, but you have a basic, no, completely exposed. So it says that Tzemach Tzedek in number 22, he says, look at Tosfos over there. That Tzemach Tzedek number 22, Tosfos says that sometimes men had their heads exposed, and Tosfos is the third line, they're mutter to expose would be kroi ba'alma if it's a one-off, even if people see mashenkin women. Harei Mavur said the Tzemach Tzedek, it's only mutter to expose your head as a one-off. You take off your yarmulke for a second, whatever. But in contrast to women who have a biblical obligation that they can't even, in the middle, take off their shaitel in front of a crowd. They can't do that. And even this, that Toy says they were allowed to one-off, is because they lived in boiling places. And sometimes it was really hot. So they took it off for a moment just to cool down.
To dry.
So Tosfos clearly says, Bikroi Ba'alma. Why does Tosfos say that? Mashma, because anything above beyond that is going to be usher.
Sure.
So it's like Tosfos clearly.
Clear.
There's another raya the Vilna Gaon brings.
How's the Vilna Gaon deal with Teshuva?
He argues in Tosfos. The problem is, though, here it says clearly, though, kids can have their heads exposed. This Gemara does say clearly kids can always have their heads exposed, which means kids don't wear yarmulkes. The Magen Avraham, though, says all kids should wear yarmulkes based on the story in number 5 of Nachman Bar Yitzchak not being a ganav. But they all have, this Gemara clearly says kids should have their heads. Can. La'oila miglu. Okay, but that's a shaila about kids. No, there really is because of these two Gemaras. But another raya the Vilna Gaon brings is from a Masechta Kala. It says that there was two Bachrim, it sounds like, walked in front of Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shua, and Rabbi Kiva. One had a covering, one didn't, completely exposed.
With the mother, whether she was a...
So Rabbi Eliezer says, this kid's the son of a mamzer, this kid's a mamzer.
Yeah.
Or ben a mamzer. And Rabbi Yeshua said, no, not a mamzer, but the mother was a niddah. Rabbi Kiva says both. So the Vilna Gaon said, what do you see from there? You can't walk in front of a chacham with an exposed head. But the issue was because he walked in front of the rabbis.
Where does he get that from?
Well, it's another Gemara. It's another Gemara that seems to say. So the Tzemach Tzedek says like this: I agree, you only get cursed to that fashion if it's in front of the rabbis. But says the Vilna Gaon, no. If it's mutter to walk in the street 5 mouth out of yarmulke, how could you get so cursed if you went in front of the rabbis like that? The only reason you would be in such hot water if you went out in front of a rav, it's always forbidden. And in front of a rav, you get hit big time. Yeah. But if it's mutter everywhere else, how could it be that, but if it's in front of a rav, you get the floor wiped with you? The Tzemach Tzedek finishes one of his letters with number 24. The Tzemach Tzedek finishes one of his letters with the Sefer Charedim. In Mitzvah Saseh, he says like this, the second line, there is a command, a person needs to place the yoke of God constantly on your head. As it says, the Eibishter is Beroisham. And that's why the Gemara says, don't walk with an exposed head. Be aware that God's above you. What's the Charedim saying? There's a tzivui. There's a tzivui to place God above your head, and therefore the Gemara says, don't walk exposed. So the Tzemach Tzedek says, you put the two and two together, Charedim is telling you, wearing a yarmulke is a tzivui, it's an instruction. So now we have the Beis Yosef saying it's a chiyuv, you have the Tzemach Tzedek, we had the Turi, the Alter Rebbe goes with the Taz, and also because once the custom is to cover, if you don't, then it's not tznius, you're exposing something which is supposed to be covered. But the Matirim, the Marshal, the Ramah, almost all the Rishonim, there were many, many people that were Matir. And there's so much to talk about, just to end with this thought, that our dear gambling rabbi, Rav Yehuda Arya of Modena, right, who was thrown under the bus, one of the reasons is because he said you don't have to wear a yarmulke in Italy, and he himself sometimes didn't. And people screamed at him, you see how modern he was, and the Ramah says the same thing. I mean, that was for sure in Italy. Even the Ramah is saying this in Poland. So when you see the whole sugya, he wasn't that rabbi wasn't so outlandish. Although somebody said maybe if he wore a yarmulke, he wouldn't have been so comfortable going to the casinos, where he wouldn't have lost all of his money.
But you know,
anyhow, we're going to end over here.
Oh yeah.
Colorado. Say what happened.